Hello, Blizzcon. I have always wanted to do that. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Backstage at Blizzard. My name is Steve Walker. I'm a game producer here at on the Hearthstone team. And today, we're going to go ahead and pull back the curtain and give you guys all a glimpse into the behind the scenes, the live operations of Blizzard. So let's go ahead and start with, what is live ops? Well, live ops is a lot of different things. We triage and mitigate issues that come up that prevent us all from playing the games we love. We actually bridge the development process and the release process of the games, bringing the games that you guys love to you. We also maintain, support, and update all of our infrastructure and processes to make sure that we are being more effective than we normally would be. So that requires a lot of work across a lot of different groups, a lot of different roles and responsibilities. So with me today, I have a few people that kind of represent some of those groups. And let's go ahead and start with introductions, starting with you, Terry.
Hi, I am Terry Wellman, cosplay enthusiast, and live ops producer for World of Warcraft.
Hi, I'm Walter Farrell. I'm a software engineer on Hearthstone's server team.
Hi, I'm Ron Gray, a senior QA manager for World of Warcraft and World of Warcraft Classic.
And I'm Chris Glover, director of site reliability engineering.
So, guys, what can go wrong?
Oh, nothing. Yeah.
So what you're seeing here behind us right now is actually an example of a mock incident that we would normally triage. So with something like this, typically a producer like myself or Terry is the first line that gets involved.
Yeah, so on this kind of thing, a player report would come in, like many people would report to customer service, or perhaps we would notice in our metrics that something was wrong with our servers. And then the first person they call, day or night, 24/7, is the game producer. And I'd get on and take a look at the issue and see what it is and see who we needed for support. A lot of times then, who we pick for support depends on what we kind of suspect. And that'll be like maybe Chris Glover's team, the SRE team, they do a lot of infrastructure stuff, so it might be something like that that we'd go to first.
Yep, that's one of our opportunities when we'll hop on and we'll start taking a look at our service level indicators. And those are things like queues, how many people are in queue, how long people have been in queue, or even what the latency for the players on various games look like. After that, we'll take a look at telemetry from our servers and from our players to see if we can identify where a problem's occurring. It may indicate that everyone who's having an issue is on the East Coast, or maybe with a particular ISP in general. That'll help us narrow down where we need to look to figure out how to fix the problem. After that, we take a look at our server logs and application logs to see if there's anything else we can identify as where the problems might be happening.
And as a live ops engineer, Chris would then be waking me up, and what I would be doing is looking at more game-specific things. So this could be maybe the underlying cause for why someone wouldn't be able to get into a game, or let's say if there's like a server crash or something like that, that's more to do with the gameplay logic and less infrastructure. So that's when I start to look at the systems that, for in my case Hearthstone, how systems would be, how they would interact together, and if they're reporting something that is something that Chris can't act on in his team, but it's something Hearthstone has expertise on, and then we look for the issue and how to resolve it. So pretty much what I would be doing is pretty much like fixing the leak, and then we would start going into action for figuring out how to actually change the pipe. And that's whenever we would start to work with QA a little bit, and that's whenever he'd ship over to Ron.
Yeah. So if Walter comes up with a solution, the team that I work with, what we would do is take that solution, test it very quickly to make sure it doesn't have any other issues that would cause, and we deploy it live. One of the key things that we want to do is make sure we get the game back up and running as fast as possible.
So this kind of illustrates sort of a three-level approach that we take to live ops and handling incidents and triaging them. So the very first thing we typically try to do is identify. We want to know what's happening, how it's affecting our players, and potentially identify root causes.
It's sometimes a little bit tricky to identify stuff because like things will happen where I'll, for example, on World of Warcraft be like, hey, I'm getting a lot of lag on this particular, like on this server. But when I go and look at it, it's actually everyone in this map in all of North America is having this problem, and that means that this shard is down or something like that. So identifying exactly what's wrong is the first step before we can try to get you guys all back in and get your play experience improved.
Yeah. And then,
Sorry, Walter, go ahead.
And then after that is whenever we go into the mitigation phase. And how that would be is, for us, after we've sort of figured out a theory of what's going on, we start to feel like, hey, how do we fix this? What is our first step? What's our first action to get players back in? So, and this is the stage where we start to think in terms of how we can safely get people back in game, because we don't want people to just ruin data on their accounts or have a bigger issue happen just trying to get them back in the game. So this is like a core time when we're trying to figure out how can we get, again, how can we Band-Aid this and then start thinking about long-term steps.
Yeah. And once we've kind of done that, it's always important for us to find a full resolution. Sometimes those mitigations are something that we do in that moment to help players get back in the game safely as possible. But in the end, we want to find a resolution that is either a fix that comes out in a future patch, or maybe it's an infrastructure change or something to that nature that really kind of helps make sure that this issue doesn't come up again. And this is kind of our incident triage. Now, LiveOps doesn't just stop with in-game support. We actually also help out with live events. In fact, there are tons of people behind the scenes right now at BlizzCon supporting this event.
Yeah, too bad we can't show that.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
It's a little hard to see.
Us just running around right now.
But Terry actually has a fun story to share with you guys about something that occurred with Heroes of the Storm.
Yeah, so just like when we put together BlizzCon, like everybody's here, the team's super pumped, and when we first worked on Heroes was a brand new esport, and we wanted to make sure the players had the best experience in that, so we spent a ton of time getting prepped. At the time, I was an engineer on that team, and so we wanted to make sure we had servers that worked well, didn't have lag during tournaments. We wanted to make sure the UI looked good, and that year we had some great successes. Heroes of the Dorm happened, and at the America's Cup in Las Vegas, the matches were super exciting. Everything had gone really right, and you would think, what could possibly go wrong? But then...
It's being reached here on the side of Cloud9, and this is when they're on that even talent footing. They're now going to be willing to take these team fights, but Cog is pushing into the bottom lane, and it looks like we have a bit of a pause.
Yeah, we have a bit of a pause in the middle of game number one between a Cognitive as well as Cloud9. It's intense, Jake. We're looking at one more team qualifying to BlizzCon. This is true.
So what did everybody see just now? What just happened, Terry?
So if you've ever played Heroes, there's a pause of the game. People say 3-2-3, and that's because that was what was paused on the screen. So what actually happened is the observer keyboard backstage it was on this table full with a bunch of people, and it fell off behind the table. And that actually locked the mouse in the center of the screen so the camera couldn't pan. And we didn't know how to fix it other than restarting the client. Luckily, there is always a backup observer keyboard, so we had to scramble to get that back up, and it was kind of a panic, but we got it back together. And then eventually we fixed the bug, so that can't happen. Keyboards can fall on the floor, it's all fine now. Also, then, like you would see at BlizzCon now, we use very large tables, but the next BlizzCon right after that, Chad, who is the live ops producer for Heroes, I saw him here with like this giant roll of duct tape. And I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, none of the keyboards are falling this year.
I'm glad we eventually found a solution for that didn't involve Chad taping down every keyboard at every BlizzCon going forward.
It's probably better that way. Yeah.
So as I mentioned earlier, one of the big things that we do on live operations is we kind of bridge the development cycle to the release of the game. We're very pivotal in that process. And Ron's team really helps out with that. And so what we're looking at here is actually a huge spike in concurrency and velocity during our launches. This is something that we really have to prep for, because it's not just like a normal login day for us.
Yeah, this is why we're getting the game ready before it comes out. We know this is coming. So it's not necessarily how many people we can support over a period of time, but it's that exact moment when we make new content and we release it. Surprise, everybody wants to try that out at the exact same moment. So this is what we do to get ready for this. But outside of just having a good game idea and preparing it and testing it, it takes a lot of people to make sure that we can get this set up.
Yeah, so we have an entire live ops team around Blizzard, and these are just several of the teams represented. Every week we meet together to make sure that everybody's launches, everybody's new products, everything new we put out, that we're not stomping all over each other, and making sure that everything's supported equally and done well. Like Chris's team, the SRE team, has to do a ton of work to make sure that happens.
There's a beautiful harmony of dev, test, and ops who all work together to make sure that when the games do hit day one, that they're going to be available and you can all enjoy.
Yeah.
Moving servers from one game to another for a launch and back again. Kind of crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things we put together is just kind of a visual representation. So you're going to see some circles come up, and they're going to represent not only the teams and the people that prepare the game, but also the environments that we test in. So up first is the game development team. These are the things you're most familiar with, such as art, design, engineering, quality assurance, BizOps, compatibility. There's a lot of little teams there. Once we have the game up and running, it goes out to the whole Blizzard QA department to test the product, to make sure they're able to give their feedback as well. Next, all of Blizzard. We make sure that we play every product before it goes out. And then things more that everybody here is probably more familiar with, which is the alpha phase, and then goes out broader to the beta phase, and then finally we make it to live. Along that entire way, there's a lot of things that can happen that we have to kind of protect the game, right? Much like a baby turtle.
A game has made it to release.
Yeah.
I want you to know, we planned that joke before the previous panel.
Yeah. She did such a better job.
She did an
That was
amazing job.
But getting the game out there to live really takes a lot of, not only just teams, which you see here is more than 16 departments and teams globally. We work simultaneously over 9 time zones. That ends up being thousands and thousands of people getting the product ready. If you've ever submitted something on the forums or submitting a bug, you're a part of this process.
Thank you guys. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
all your
We
efforts.
definitely appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's including dozens, if not hundreds, of running environments at any given time. So a lot of things to keep an eye on.
Yeah. Now, Chris, part of this, one of the huge things that we do during this time period is a lot of stress testing and such, that's something that your team is very involved in.
Yeah, so traditionally how we used to test our environments before we'd go live is we'd have a separate environment called our stress test environment. And we'd throw as much load as possible to try and determine how far we could take our production environment. But over the years, our live environment has grown, and keeping parity with that test environment became very difficult. So a few years ago, we changed our philosophy to start stress testing our production environment. So we'd set aside some time each week and start throwing load at the production environment and look for weaknesses and where it would slow down and where it might fail. This helps us build the confidence we need to continue adding more players and more services to our environment.
And what are some of the values that we've gotten out of that? Like, I know that we've actually had some really successes in the past thanks to these changes to how we actually test our production environment.
So testing the production environment is a little scary. It's inherently risky.
Have we ever broken anything?
Yeah, we've broken things a couple of times. I think one of the times leading up to the Overwatch launch, we were stress testing our login system, and shortly after the test began, we noticed that players could no longer log into Battle.net. So immediately we stopped the testing and we started triaging the incident and seeing what's going on. Turns out that we were able to identify that some of the throttles we had in place for our logins weren't acting as we'd intended them to. But the nice thing about this was we were able to correct that before we got to launch. Right. It was just one of many things that helped us deliver such a smooth Overwatch launch. So
yeah, and that was a huge win.
When we tested that on live, what would the players have seen? Like, would they have noticed anything that we were messing around with stuff?
Players who were already in wouldn't have seen any problems, but if you were trying to log in, you would have seen yourself in a queue or a wait to get into Battle.net or unable to join anything. So
awesome. Yeah, so what you'll see here is kind of a 3-step approach that we take to all of the Blizzard games that we make. The first thing, we have to start with a good design, gameplay first. Next up, we go into testing, our commitment to quality. This, again, the circles that we showed a little bit ago includes everybody. And then finally, the real key ingredient here is iteration. This is why we often get the, Blizzard soon TM, or it's ready when it's ready. Like, no joke, we do go through these steps. And if we get to iteration and we don't feel it's ready, we start back over to design. Along the way, once we have this, before leading up to a release, what we do is we literally get together at a really big table, and a representative from each of the departments that we talked about get around the table, and we have a meeting called the go or no-go meeting. Now, this doesn't happen day of, or even within, within weeks of the launch, so it's not right up to the minute, just in case we are a no-go.
Yeah. All right, so we've run through all of our checklists. QA has signed off on the game. We've done our infrastructure stress testing. So we know what kind of load we can handle on day one, and we can account for that burst. So what are some of the risks, though, that we haven't taken into account yet?
So one thing that you might be a big risk is when you come out with a new expansion, we have brand new game systems that have not been tested by a big group of people. So if we think there's some inherent risk about balance or any problems with gameplay, we'll make sure that we have a mitigation plan. So as soon as it goes live, the players can see it. If we need to respond, we can do that immediately. And it's kind of the same for the engineering stuff as well.
Yeah, especially for the server team, we're worried about player data as we go from older launch to a newer launch.
Right.
So like for us, like we have steps for migration for if things should change between one release to another. And we're also worried about people's accounts from their beginning of time. Because for us, we can as you could probably attest, Ron, we can test tons of just data that we have in the actual new expansion, but we may not have the actual natural data that you had from when you first started your account, like way back a long time ago.
Right, especially for World of Warcraft, right? You know, it's been in development for quite some time. You know, it's over 14 years since the game has been out. One of the things that we do is we take samples of maybe an account that only played through the original World of Warcraft. So maybe somebody who currently plays today but has a lot of alts. What we do is we take their data and run that through to make sure there's no scenarios, but we can't cover them all. We just do a sample set.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so for the new content coming out, perhaps we'll have QA and engineers and designers on standby so that we can roll out quick fixes and have hot fixes ready to go to cover any issues that may crop up. As for the load on the servers for that initial velocity burst, well, we can probably put some queuing in place so that we can kind of spread that out over the course of the launch. All right, so does everyone go? And then we have an issue.
This is where we really have screen.
And then we have an issue.
This is where we really have screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so what you're seeing here, this is a player concurrency graph for the Knights of the Frozen Throne launch for Hearthstone. So concurrency is just players in-game. So it was about 6 hours. Me and Terry and Steve were all on this at the time. And everything was going totally smoothly, but in the Asia region, about 6 hours in, we just started seeing players decline. But we saw our services were totally fine. People were still in the game playing, but we were getting reports from our customer service and from our service level coordinators in CN, or China, where they were telling us, hey, our players can't get in, and something's going on. So for us, we started to think, okay, what's going on? Like, we obviously have an issue that seems very unique. So then we start to like dive deeper. So just as a kind of like, we keep talking about login queues and how these work. So a very basic overview for Hearthstone, at least, would kind of work like this. So imagine a line or a queue, and if you're the beginning of the queue, you're going to be the first person to get in. And of course, if you're further down, you'll have to wait some time to log in if we have queuing enabled. So this is just an example on one game server. We have thousands of game servers, and the example's a little, just like a little more simplified, but it's whenever you would log in, if you're still in the queue, then you would get this lovely graphic of, hey, you need to wait for the tables because they're all full. And as you actually log in, you actually enter the game server and we start preparing your data. We start to do transactions and we start to do work. And that's like rolling your new quests, giving you your collection and any of your decks that you have. Any purchases that you might have done or any rewards that you would have gotten from outside of the game, we then have to query our other services and ask for those and then turn those into Hearthstone products. And we have things that we have to spend CPU time to get through. So this is a general login example. Were you gonna say something?
This happens every login for most of the games. Every
Right.
day, every time you log in, you get new info. But on a new expansion launch, like this was Knights of the Frozen Throne, you probably have a lot of new stuff, right? Because you bought a lot of cards and you got more rewards than usual. So these are, even though we have giant load, it's a little slower on that day.
Yeah. So, and this is like the general, like anytime you log in, what would happen. So what was unique to the Knights of the Frozen Throne launch that was happening in this time was, imagine this queue and we have one game server and you're doing one login per second. And we usually keep it very restrictive at first, just to see how people are flowing in, and as things are fine, we start to open up the queues and we let everyone in. So in this scenario, if you were first in line, it would take 1 second or it would be almost instantaneous for you to log in. If you're second, it could take up to 2 seconds. If you're 10th, it could take up to 10 seconds. Pretty simple. So the actual issue that happened here was if you're the first in line and instead of actually logging in, like let's say you're on your lunch break and you just hard close and you just run away, whatever was happening. And whenever you left the queue, it should go to the second person in line and just immediately pick them up and put them in the queue. But what we were actually having was we were having a timeout that occurred. And this was the actual bug. So what would happen is instead of it immediately going to the second person, you would have up to a 10-second wait until getting to the second person. So that's not too big of a deal, because like a 1 second wait, not too crazy, especially when you're logging in on a release day. But the issue was, as people were logging in and then exiting out, they would actually get runs of data, natural data, that then maybe if you were the sixth person in queue and there's 5 people in front of you that left, you now have to wait an entire minute. So this was actually, and then you would finally get in. So this is the kind of issue that we were thinking what was kind of going on, and we started to look at...
Steve's actually counting.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
Walter,
Walter.
on a calculator.
Slow down. I'm trying to keep up.
It adds up.
But so you're saying, though, with this timeout, we might have players that are realistically next in queue, but are waiting now upwards to a couple of minutes to get into the game.
Yeah, exactly. And what we would look at is we would look at the queue and we'd see where you were at, and we started to notice people would jump out of queue and jump into the back and line up behind themselves.
Right, because naturally,
Yeah.
you guys know, like when you're playing a game and you're like, oh, I'm stuck on a loading screen for a long time, the first thing you'll do is just hard close the client and try again. You'll be like, oh, maybe I'll get in right away.
Yeah.
But in this case, when that happened, you were lined up behind your phantom self.
Yeah, and that's
So you're waiting for yourself.
and that's where we call this the phantom queuing bug,
Yeah.
that we all know so fondly. So now we kind of have we see what the issue is now. We know that this is happening, and we know that we start to theorize what the actual fix would be. And we know that it would probably be a long-winded thing that we would have to talk to multiple teams. So we start to think, okay, how can we get people safely into the game now? Like,
Right.
what can we do to keep players on launch day? How can we keep them in the game?
Yeah, because one of the things we're seeing at this point is that the load on the servers themselves doesn't actually reflect the size of these queues.
Yeah.
So this is where that phantom queue really kind of gets
Right.
sort of theorized and solidified.
Yeah.
Because we have metrics from our previous patches when cost went out that was, hey, like we're used to handling this kind of load, so this didn't look natural for us. Like it shouldn't have been queued for that long.
Exactly. So
It would be like here at Blizzcon if everybody's waiting outside and there's nobody inside and we're open.
Yeah,
that would be a problem.
it's a perfect example.
Exactly.
So now we have this idea of what could be going on, and now we have a theory. We have a theory that we know that people aren't causing the issue here. It's just the fact that they're not getting into the game. So then we start to think, what variables can we manipulate or kind of move around to help people come in without our servers crashing or people having data that's corrupted or anything like that. So we know that in this example that going forward, we think, okay, instead of looking at one person at a time, what if we looked at a scale of 10 more? What if we looked at 10 people at a time? And then we start to try to log them in all at once. So this is the first thing that we started to look at. And we said, okay, we took that to a one individual server, and we start to say, okay, what would be the worst thing that would happen if we were to let everyone in and something bad were to happen? And that would be, in this scenario, that if the game blade were to crash or there would be like performance lag, people would then just exit the game and be stuck in a queue. So we weren't too worried at this point because people weren't in game and actually having an issue, that we could go forward with this plan.
Yeah, we were making this judgment call where, like, on live ops, you don't always have a great option. There's the option between, I might crash this game server, but maybe this is a solve for all these people in line, so maybe we'll take this risk, or we leave people queued. So
Exactly.
that's the choice you made, was to let them in.
Yep, and
Yeah.
so what this basically did is once we pumped it up to 10 logins per second for this one game blade, then instead of having these serial timeouts, it would then be one parallel timeout, so one 10-second instance, and we would still get a couple people immediately logged in, and then we would look at batches of 10. So, and we wouldn't actually, the first thing that, of course, everybody's probably thinking is, how come we just don't leave this open? And it's just because if we left this open right during launch, all of the time, like all the computation time is gonna degrade performance. You might not even get into the game because it could overload things.
Yeah, this only works because half of the groups are phantoms.
Yeah.
Right? They're
Yeah,
not
exactly.
real players.
Yeah.
So we stepped back and we identified that there was something causing players not to get into the game servers, even though we saw queues growing. We took a look and saw that, we saw phantom players waiting in queue. And we saw that by opening up a single game server at a time and clearing that out, we were able to mitigate this at that time and got players through those kind of phantom queuers and back into the game as quickly as possible. And then down the road,
we would resolve the issue. And thank you, Steve. That's me in tights on the.
That's how Walter solves all his issues,
Yeah.
is by wearing tights.
it's true.
This is the fix.
But yeah,
You may be asking,
Thank you.
is that a ukulele?
it's a ukulele. You're close, but it's 6 strings. 6 strings.
Ukulele.
Ukulele, yeah. Look it up.
So, just hearing you guys go through that, I wasn't there when that actually happened, but I kind of felt the stress, and that was a very complicated situation.
None at all.
How do you, maybe we could share with everybody, like, how do we take that stress and turn it into something positive? Yeah.
Well, sometimes you just have to get some dino suits. Actually, this is a Steve and I being giant dorks, but we dressed up for Journey to Ungoro, because Live Ops sort of leads the team out, because the flip side of the coin of stress is excitement. And everyone's really excited. The whole dev team's super excited for us. So I don't know how we decided to buy dino suits. I feel like this is a natural kind of decision Steve and I would make. Though.
Yeah, this is something that we did, as Terry mentioned, during the launch for Journey to Ungoro. One of the real goals that we want to do is kind of drive the excitement with just even our simple communications to the team, talking about here's the issues coming up like that. So we went out, we got a whole series of photos like this, and then we added them all to our deployment emails so that every hour or so when we would update the team on the progress of the launch, they were really excited to see this and had some kind of like extra special treat.
We tricked them into reading our tech emails. by putting this on there.
It worked.
Yeah. It did work. It did
So
work.
keeping the team happy through dinosaur suits.
Yeah, and that's something that's especially important for producers like Terry or I. And this also kind of helps
Brought the whole team
to
in.
bond the team as well, since we're typically in these high stress situations.
Yeah.
This is the team. The team finally we got together, and everyone in Live Ops we did this fake RPG campaign, and it was a really good time. And it really bonds for people who have to go through our entire job is just high stress situation. Like if something goes wrong, you have to deal with it. As Steve was saying, oh, whenever I have to talk to someone in leadership, it's about something bad. So, so it's sometimes nice to make sure we can bond together on that stuff.
I'm sure there's a checklist that says Walter's tights.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm wearing
yeah.
mine now,
They're
actually.
under the pants.
I keep them on at all times.
That's awesome. Well, once the game's live, a lot of fun's been had, but we have to maintain and keep the environments up and running. So traditionally, we would do this by taking weekly downtime. Weekly downtime, I don't know, how do you feel about
On
it?
Tuesdays, one of the cool things of the guilds that I saw in World of Warcraft, that I think they were called We Go Outside on Tuesdays, which kind of shows, that type of maintenance
Tuesdays.
became a part of the culture.
It definitely became a part of the culture. Let's be real. Downtime is great if you want to go outside with the family, see how the weather is, do some yard work, or maybe even fire up the grill, Steve.
Look at necromantic barbecue.
Yeah, that's the way to go. A few years ago we said, well, what would a world without downtime look like? And we started thinking to ourselves, okay, what do we need to do to get to a world where we don't have to take our services offline every week? From a player perspective, it's not a real great experience, right? You want to play, you're home, you want to get some games in. Oh, sorry, it's maintenance time. So we kicked off what we call our 3 nines initiative. So this was an opportunity for us to take a look at all of our services across the company and determine how could we get to three nines of availability for every service that we have. This really required us to take a look at our processes, take a look at how we engineer our services, and really evolve the way we think about things.
Yeah, it was definitely a huge mindset change for teams who had been taking these 8-hour weekly downtimes, 8 hours every time. If you've played Blizzard games for a long time, you know that it would be an expansion launch where you take the service down for 8 hours. That was the thing. When I started at Blizzard, I worked on the platform team, and at the time, the deployments for StarCraft 2 were all manual. And this is an actual StarCraft 2 checklist. It's 11 pages of manual steps that we would hand off.
So multiple people has to check every one of those tiny little lines.
Yeah, it'd be like, oh, Walter does this, Chris does, oh, Chris is on lunch, we'll wait for that. And
Coffee breaks are important.
Yeah.
And at the time too, our services were linked platform-wise together also. So when we took down StarCraft 2, we would also take down all the other games. So the change was we wanted to automate this process so that most of these steps that were done by people, we just had them automatically done either before the deployment or during the deployment by robots. And so in red, these are all the steps that we eliminated and had robots do. And for games like Heroes of the Storm and StarCraft 2 and for WoW, we've automated the deployments so that this was the sample checklist that came out. These took under 30 minutes to do. And we've gotten a lot of these even shorter where they just bounce. We take the service and come back up. So, yay. I'm glad you guys don't do 8-hour downtimes. I don't like your downtime.
So this is just one example of how we apply automation. All the teams look at this constantly to try to do that, but it doesn't get it down to zero.
Right.
Nope.
And the kind of cool thing about this is that games that came after StarCraft kind of learned from these lessons, and they engineered newer ways to reduce downtime.
Yeah. Hey, Walter, why don't we try and run multiple versions of the service at one time?
So how this would really work is we have a concept called red-blue swapping, and this is something that we pretty much started with D3, and they first got it out into production. And how this would pretty much work is when we stand up a service, so version 1 of Diablo 3, whenever you would then move through, if you would log in, give me the clicker, Steve. I can do this better. So whenever you would log in, so let's
really
say
happens at work
as well. I love you, Steve. So if you were to log in as your barbarian with version 1, you would connect straight to the service, not a problem. Everything was just as normal. And then as other people would log in, it would be just as fine. And let's say we have a patch, so version 1.1. We would now stand this up alongside. Now because we have the infrastructure changes now where we can now support 2 versions at the same time, we would then allow these to just sit up just as a brand new server build. So what would happen is if the next player that would log in, they would then go to the blue side. So they're on the new version, away from the 1.0 version, and everything would work harmoniously between them. So everyone on the red side can still play their games, not a problem, and the person on the blue side will always stay at that version or higher. So as people start to log off, so let's say you're barbarian from the beginning, you end your game session and you come back in, you are now automatically routed to the blue side without even knowing that it even happened. And then as people start to dwindle away or they start to log off and there's no more people connected to the red side, the older side, we then deprecate that. And then now everyone then connects to the 1.1 side, the blue side, and the players didn't know anything about how we would have to go through the deployment process. And they see no change at all, rather than the bug fixes, I would assume.
And you were able to do this for all hot fixes too, right? Like when you fix the server for the,
Yeah, and this is something that we employ also in Hearthstone a lot, and when newer games going forward, we have a mindset of this or better in mind. And this is pretty much just a pretty standard model to keep everyone in the game, regardless of what version they kind of have, and it lets them migrate to the new service on their time, not us taking them down.
Right. And WoW does the same kind of thing for client updates. We patch down a little bit, and then we also on the server can bring slow down times or fast down times that aren't slow anymore. And that has allowed us to do a global launch. So Battle for Azeroth was the first global simultaneous World of Warcraft launch, and this was all due to a lot of the automation that we had in place before that allowed us to respond to incidents we have and problems on the server very, very quickly, and also to our hotfix process, which is like heavily driven by like Ron's team and QA.
Yeah, like speaking to the global, the simultaneous global release, it's really interesting that kind of initiated on the team,
right?
Where they were, let's slowly get to that point because that's what's best for the player. Like once we're out there live, though, the things that we're working on now is now we're getting more and more efficient and effective of getting the game out faster and faster. Once it's out there, we're trying to improve our systems for in-game reporting. This is just an image of if anybody's on the public test realm for World of Warcraft during Battle for Azeroth, we've specifically put in a UI and an interface and a system that allows you to enter any issue you want right inside. And it goes right into the database, and the team that I work with, we review each one of these. Now, multiple games have variations of this as well, not just for the PTR. There's also an option of using any of the official forums. We do read those, so if you have like feedback
Definitely.
or bugs, we go through and make sure we check out all of those, which leads up to allowing us to use our hotfix technology. So we know the faster that we can get anybody to report an issue to us that we understand, we can use this hotfix technology to really avoid pretty much everything you've seen so far in this panel. Like, we don't have to do the go, no go, or push buttons, or have conversations, or take clickers from each other.
Yeah, because on a WoW launch, we use hotfixes just like, so we can put out a hotfix in just a matter of minutes. So we
Yes.
can put out hundreds in a day as long as we're all on, when an expansion happens, we're all on point. Ron's team's looking, my team's looking, and as soon as a designer sees something, they can fix it. We can deploy to some servers, and then you guys test it.
Yeah, so especially when we're live, we're monitoring all these channels, and when we see this, basically what we can do is we can send a specific code change right to the server. When you log into World of Warcraft, for example, the first thing that your system does while the loading screen is on is check. Are there any updates that I need? If there are, it comes down very safely, and you can log in, and you were unaware of any issues that happen. It's magic.
Pretty
I believe
great.
magic is what we call it for a while. So a little while ago, we talked about design, testing, and iteration. What's really awesome at Blizzard is that it doesn't just apply to the games, but how we learn and grow. We also apply that to the processes that we see, right? So we design new processes, we iterate on those processes, and we test them. And after we've launched a game, all the issues, so on the quality assurance side, we review every issue that happens.
We clean up everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not only do we resolve them, but we have meetings afterwards, and we do a root cause analysis. So if there were major issues, we sit down and we go get together as a team and figure, how can we prevent this from ever happening again? And I know that also happens on the large infrastructure side.
Yeah, we treat each incident as an opportunity for learning, and we catalog every incident that we have, and we actually make it available for the whole company, so that anyone who joins or anyone who's just interested in what failed, what happened, what did we learn from it, they can read about that and also apply that to new services that we're building so that we don't repeat those same mistakes.
Yeah. It's so far so good. Interesting fact. Really, it's kind of cool. Following this process, speaking for World of Warcraft. So since the beginning of World of Warcraft development, again, like 14, 15 plus years, before Battle for Azeroth launched, we actually we hit a pretty big milestone. We've now resolved over 500,000 issues that have ever been reported in World of Warcraft, which is very staggering.
Very impressive.
Because we're constantly trying to get better. It's so much different for us on WoW or for all the Blizzard games than it is when I play other games where sometimes someone will put out a game and they might make one bug fix patch, or 6 months later they'll put out a fix. Like every day we put out fixes, every single day for our services.
Yeah, I could pretty much say that. Yeah, not a day that goes by.
Not a day.
And even on the development side, after we've gone through a launch and everything like that, we actually go and we have a retrospective on how did the launch go well, what went well, what didn't go well, and what we could do to improve in the future and be better.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we also, it's interesting, like working with Steve, we would sit on, we'd watch streamers and we would read Reddit and we'd read the forums, and like when it comes out, we're all really, really excited to see you guys play our games and to see if you like it and see if it's going well. And so is the whole design team, so all the artists, all the producers, everybody's there. And so we're always listening and watching for what you guys are reporting back and telling us about the game.
Yeah, and that kind of really goes back to the question of like, why do we do all this? There's a lot of work. Live operations is almost always going. It's always doing something. So like, what is it that drives us and makes us want to do this job? And really what it is it's passion. We have passion for our games. We have passion for our community. We have passion for everything we do. We're all gamers too.
I want to get ready for raid night.
Yeah. Like I know, we're playing the Diablo season every time it rolls up.
Yeah, never missing Diablo seasons. And it just comes down to the point where it's like, we know that we want the games to be better, and we whenever we go and we look on social media and stuff like that, like these are things sometimes that we see, and some things that we're just like, hey, people want these things. Like let's figure this out and get things done, and that's the whole thing, because we are the gamers as well. Like those criticisms are things that we have as well sometimes. So it's an interesting process because we're actually like right there on the front line to see these things and do it.
I don't know if you guys get this, but like with my friends and family, they're like, wow, you work on this for a really long time. Doesn't it isn't it kind of lackluster when the game comes out and it's like completely the
No.
opposite?
It's
It's
so
like two
exciting
different
when the game
mindsets.
comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to play WoW. Like that was like the thing about let's get through the expansion launch and make sure it goes great, and then we can all play more. Because we sit in the office
Yeah.
and play. And
There's nothing like having your main or your main account going through the content, and you know that's what really brings all of us to Blizzard at the end of the day. Like,
Yeah, I
being
mean,
passionate.
I know, like during launch days, just as much as you guys, give us reports through the online forums and stuff like that, coworkers are coming up to our desk and going, "Hey, there's this issue I just ran into," and then we're like, "Oh, let's take a look at that and see what we can
Right
do to
there.
fix that."
yeah.
It's nothing more incentivizing than having your spouse call you too and ask, hey, when's something going to be fixed?
Yeah, yeah. Launch days when your phone starts blowing up from all your friends going, "Hey, I ran into this bug.
Yeah.
Can you fix it?"
My husband watches Hearthstone streams. So when I was a Hearthstone producer, he would report all the bugs to me. So thanks, Dan. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Best bug reporter. Yeah.
It's interesting that mindset shift, like when you're not at work and you're home. I have an 8-year-old son who will often ask me a lot of questions. World of Warcraft's big, in case you didn't know, and I don't know everything about it, but he really expects me
You
to
should
know
know
everything
everything
about
about
it,
WoW.
or if he finds a bug, he really looks at me like, "Dad, like what is this?" I'm like, "Thank you. Please report it in the in-game bug reporting, and I will
Official forums.
or put it in the official forums, and I will get it to it on Monday."
Nobody loves getting woken up at 3 in the morning, but I'm very happy to get woken up for an issue at 3 in the morning. That's fine. I want WoW to run great, and so it's totally worth it to me. I would be annoyed if I didn't get called about something and people were suffering. So I think we're all just really interested in having our games run as good as they possibly can, have our services up, and be healthy as much as possible.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope you really enjoyed our view behind the scenes and the glimpse at Backstage at Blizzard. Thank you, and enjoy your Blizzard. We really enjoyed our view behind the scenes and the glimpse at Backstage at Blizzard. Thank you, and enjoy your BlizzCon.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.